Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jeanette. I'm going to be your chair for the next 2 sessions, and you're really in for a delight. I'm really happy to introduce, and I'm actually quite privileged to introduce this speaker. I've been working with him for a while on the effort he's going to talk about. Michael Daniel. He is the president and CEO of the Cyber Threat Alliance. Prior to that assignment, he was special assistant to President Obama in the U.S., and cybersecurity coordinator on the National Security Council. So he's had some prestigious jobs. And he's here today to talk about leveling up, why sharing threat intelligence actually makes you more competitive. Go ahead, Michael.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jeanette, and thanks everyone for, thanks to the Virus Bulletin folks for inviting me to speak, and for all of you for coming today. So I'm gonna jump right into this question, because all of you have been talking about this information for this thing called information sharing for 20 years, right? And arguably, the industry as a whole has been doing a pretty poor job of it. And you've heard, if some of you were in the threat intelligence sharing sequence, where Adam Myers from CrowdStrike was talking about it, and the previous speaker was just talking some about all of the issues around this. There are actually plenty of reasons why, but I'm here to talk to you about how actually sharing intelligence can in fact make you more competitive, and why the environment today makes that so. So the first thing is that we actually have to disaggregate some of what we're talking about. Because a lot of times we lump information sharing all together, and we act like all information is the same. And moreover, we actually act like every organization in the entire world should be sharing all of these different kinds of information with each other all of the time, which is completely wrong. Most 99.9% of the organizations on the planet would not know what to do with a technical indicator if you handed it to them in bulk. They would not know what to do with it on their networks. They wouldn't know how to get it out of their networks. And why we expect them, and why we keep acting like they should be able to do something with it, is actually kind of mystifying, because most of them are never going to be very good at it. And so when we start talking about information sharing, the first thing we actually have to do is talk about what kind of information are we talking about. Are we talking about the technical data that your companies are very good at understanding and sharing? Are we talking about attribution, who did it? Are we talking about this is what you need to do to actually deal with the problem? This is what you need to do, that's defensive measures. This is what you need to do to actually stop, to prevent yourself from having a problem in the first place. Is it strategic warning? These kinds of bad guys are doing these kinds of things in this industry. What I consider to be tactical warning. This bad guy is targeting your company today. Situational awareness. What's the telemetry show? How widespread is WannaCry or NotPetya or VPN filter? Those are all very different kinds of information. And when we set up our information sharing organizations, we need to take this into account. And I would submit to you that we actually should be expecting the cybersecurity vendor industry to be sharing those top 2 things, technical data and context. And maybe the last thing, situational awareness. We should be expecting, as societies, we should expect the industry to share that amongst itself, and then use that to protect everybody else. And we should stop expecting everybody else to share that kind of information. So when you actually think about the things that hinder us from doing that in the industry, there's really kind of 4 things that actually, in my view, stop us. One is, technical problems. Actually, how do you have an accepted standard for how you share information, even at the technical level? Even when you drill down into something like sticks format, you actually discover that everybody's implementation of sticks is slightly different, right? So actually doing the interchange and making sure that what one company calls something is the same that another company calls something is actually quite challenging. There's legal issues, whether you're talking about antitrust problems, privacy issues, liability issues. They sort of plague, the legal constructs sort of plague the industry. There's the issue of the business model, right? How do you actually make money off of this? Because it actually has to support what you're doing. There has to be a return on investment. It has to support your business model. And then there's just the plain old cultural factors. Shouldn't I really know more than anybody else, and that's how I am awesome, right? The demonstration of your awesomeness in the industry is how much you know. So all of these factors combine to make it very difficult for companies to share. But my argument is that, in fact, actually, what we have discovered through building the Cyber Threat Alliance is that sharing actually improves your competitive edge. And we have, through building CTA, figured out ways to actually address all four of these issues, although I won't claim that what we're doing is 100% perfect, because we're still learning. But what we've done is we've actually built a model that I think works. And it actually starts to get at these questions of why does threat sharing enhance your competitive edge? First of all, cybersecurity is not just a technical problem. Yes, it is a technical problem, but it's much more than that. It's also an economic problem. It's a business problem. It's a national security problem. It's a political problem. Jeanette's going to talk about fake news in just a minute, in the next session. Political problem, right? Not just a technical problem. There is no way that any one company can possibly have all of the expertise to deal with all of the different things that makes up cybersecurity. It's just not possible. The ability to actually array the kind of expertise that you need to address the full scope of threats that we now face in cyberspace means that you must be working together. And it doesn't blunt your competitive edge if you're actually working with a company that brings a comparative advantage in another area to the table. In fact, it enhances it because it means that you actually get a boost from what the other people are doing. Second, I would argue that the cybersecurity benefits come from actually taking action. Ultimately, the information that we share needs to be actionable in some way. If we are sharing information with an end user, we want them to do something, right? At the end of the day, we either want to put the information into a firewall, we want to put it into a detection system, we want to use it for research, we want to be able to identify the bad guy, we want to disrupt the bad guy. It may not be immediate. In other words, I'm not saying that you want to necessarily take action right away, because sometimes you actually want to watch what the bad guys do. I spent 11 years working with the US intelligence community. Sometimes you want to just watch and wait, but at some point you want to take action. And so in those cases, ultimately at the end of the day, right, it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. And the competitive advantage comes not from this a mass of indicators, but it's what you do with the indicators. At some level, some of the argument we've been having, it's like we've been saying, you should buy my stuff because my inadequate pool of data is bigger than that person's inadequate pool of data. That makes no sense. And so instead, the competition needs to occur on what you do with the data. My analysis is better. My customer service is better. I'm cuddlier. Whatever the ultimate competitive advantage is. But it's not just on the raw data. And then lastly, we all know that what we've been doing hasn't worked. The threat out there is continuing to get worse, not better. The bad guys are continuing to proliferate. They're continuing to discover that what you can do in cyberspace is paying off. The bad guys have a fabulous business model right now. If you're a criminal, 50, 60,000 lines, a really crappy code, you can make $1 bazillion that way, it seems like. Nation states have all discovered that they can pursue their interests through cyberspace. So what we're doing to actually undermine the bad guys' business model is not working. So in order to actually do that, we have to figure out ways to disrupt the adversary systematically from beginning to end. And not just, disrupt their botnet for 2 hours, but actually fundamentally start to undermine their entire business model. I want to make them start to do business process reengineering on a regular basis. But to do that, we actually have to share data across a whole bunch of different organizations. in order to assemble the kinds of products and outputs that we want that actually give you the full picture, for example, of the playbook that the adversary is going to run, we actually have to cooperate and collaborate, or we'll never actually be able to assemble that full view of the adversary so that we can actually then collaborate together to disrupt what the adversary is doing. So within, so I'll show you one thing that was on a different slide. So these original founding charter members that you see there came together to actually create the Cyber Threat Alliance to do exactly what I was just talking about. As of yesterday, we actually announced 4 new members of the Cyber Threat Alliance. So Alien Vault, Lastline, NEC, and Dragos actually just officially became members yesterday. So we are now up to 20 companies. But the model that we've built is one where we address a couple of the issues that we were talking about. One, we've built a technical platform that enables our member companies to share data at speed, at scale, and we're continuing to evolve that as we learn. We actually have a sharing requirement. So if you're going to be a part of the Cyber Threat Alliance, you have to share. So no freeloading in there. You actually have to meet a certain threshold of sharing on a daily basis. There's also transparency. Everybody in the alliance can see who shared what. In fact, everybody can see exactly who shared what amount. If you don't think that CEOs don't pay attention to where they fall on the sharing list, yeah. We've addressed the transparency issues, and we've also addressed the issues of what are people going to do with the data. It's very upfront. When the data that is shared with us is intended to be used by the members to actually improve their products and services. So we're very upfront about that. We're also very upfront about who can join the alliance. The rule set for us is an objective set of rules so that we can comply with U.S. antitrust and, frankly, EU antitrust regulations. So within this, I want to give you 3 examples of how the sharing that CTA has done has actually benefited all of our members. So one was on WannaCry. When the WannaCry outbreak happened, we very rapidly convened all of the members. In fact, I was in Israel at the time for Israel Cyber Week, and when we convened all of the members, what we were able to do very quickly was to eliminate some of the fog that had accumulated around what was going on. At that point, it was so early that everybody was still running around looking for the email phishing attack that was driving WannaCry. And what all of our members collectively, as we started going around the virtual table, was not a single one of our members, at the time we had 12, not a single one of our 12 members had seen a single email that could be associated with WannaCry. Now, any one of our members was sort of saying, well, maybe we just didn't see it, because we know that we don't see everything. But when all 12 of the members were arriving at the same conclusion, that helped very quickly eliminate a lot of the fog that was going on and allowed us to, in fact, actually go to several governments who were just about to publish some information about looking for the phishing email to say, probably shouldn't do that, you'll look a little foolish. And to their credit, they actually listened to us and didn't. And we probably got about a 24 to 48 hour jump on what was otherwise, what it would have otherwise taken our members to get there. So that's one example. The second example is VPN filter. So this is actually very interesting because Cisco Talos had been doing a lot of research on the VPN filter malware set. And it's a particularly fascinating piece of malware if you're a cyber nerd like me, right? But it's particularly nasty because it has a destructive set. And so Cisco had become concerned. The level of infection rate was starting to spike. And so we knew that it was getting close to time to actually go public with the findings. But Cisco did something very interesting, which was they came to the alliance and they said, we will brief all of the alliance members a few days in advance of going live with our findings. And we will share the technical data and ensure that it's in the platform a few days before going live with our findings. And this did a couple of things. We were actually able to then have all of our members ready to go, as ready as they could be, with putting the protections into their systems in place as well as they could. Obviously, mostly it was detections because all this stuff was on routers that are very hard to actually protect, but the detections into place, they could have their blogs ready to go. And the result was that when Cisco went live with their findings, they didn't just have themselves going out there, they had almost all of the CTA members virtually simultaneously supporting them in what they did. They got a lot of credit. They got identified as the source of this from the other CTA members, but they got a much bigger lift of publicity and identification for what they did. The other members were able to, instead of fielding those irate phone calls from the CEO of like, why didn't we know about this? They were able to say, yes, we knew about this and we're ready. They could field those phone calls from customers and say, yes, we're already working on that. We also managed to coordinate this activity with the US government. So 30 minutes before Cisco released its findings publicly, the US Justice Department and the FBI took legal action against many of the domains that the second stage of the malware was calling out to. And so we were able to boost the impact even further by that level of collaboration and coordination. And then the last example is simply that the automated sharing that we do on a daily basis, every single one of our members, as they have delved into it, have realized that they're learning something new. They're seeing something on a daily basis that they otherwise wouldn't get. It varies in percentage and it varies in exactly what that data is, depending on their business model and their scope. But every single one of our members gets something that they otherwise wouldn't get because they're members of CTA. And this enables them to boost the value of their products and services because they are CTA members. So those are just 3 examples of how sharing within the Cyber Threat Alliance has made our member companies more competitive, more effective at what they've done. Okay, so we start sharing in CTA, so where are we going? So now what? So a lot of what we're trying to do now is build up the sharing organizations, because it's my contention, as I said, that we need to focus the technical sharing efforts, that the technical indicators, the context, the situational awareness, we need to focus that on the technically competent entities and enable that robust sharing to occur in the background in a way that's completely transparent to 98% of the users on the planet. We need to actually start to enable more robust sharing between sectors. We're starting to really see the reuse of tools, right? We're seeing the reuse of tools between nation states and criminals, but we're also starting to see them bleeding over into different sectors. We're seeing them do things. We're seeing them pivot when they get into a network. They start doing an assessment. Is there useful IP that I can steal? Nope. Okay. Is there useful PII I can steal? No, not really. Okay, fine. I'll do some illicit crypto mining while I'm here and steal a bunch of cycles from these people. We're starting to see that kind of activity, and so we need to enable that robust sharing between sectors in order to improve what we're doing. And then finally, we need to continue to figure out ways to translate this sharing into action. How do we actually start to really create those outputs that do that systemic disruption that I was talking about earlier, so that we actually knock the adversary back on their heels, not for a couple of hours, but for days, weeks, months, force them to expend a lot more resources to achieve their goals. And we need to use this shared data to identify the specific actions that different parts of the ecosystem can take. What all of our member companies can do, what companies here can do, is different than what the telcos can do. It's different than what governments can do. It's different than what the critical infrastructure verticals can do. And we need to start working that out and using our shared data and shared situational awareness to enable that. So those are the key lessons that I wanted to lay down for you. So at this point, I'll open it up to questions.